welcome to the American Job Center and our resume development presentation here. So as you're developing your resume, there are a couple things that we'll go over here that are incredibly important to consider when it comes to writing your resume. The first thing you'll want to do is to go over the job posting. And you don't need to memorize it or anything like that, but it's important to have a good understanding of what's in the job posting because that's where you'll get your keywords. We'll go over the keywords a little bit, but essentially how it works nowadays is the vast majority of your resumes, when you submit them online, are going to be scanned through a computer program. And that computer program will scan your resume and look for certain keywords. If you don't have enough keywords, your resume will get tossed out and nobody will ever actually look at it. So, where do you get your keywords? And that's where the job postings come in. When you're reading the job description and their list of requirements, that's where you'll get most of what you'll want to put on your resume. And as much of a pain as it might sound like, you almost have to alter your resume for each different job you're looking for. Of course, have your basic template resume, but if it's a job you really want, I strongly encourage you to go through the job posting and look for the keywords. And what I mean by that is, how do they phrase the job duties you'll have? What are the words that the job posting uses to describe the position? And you'll want to sort of mimic those words in your resume. So you want to select and highlight at least 10 items that you find are the most important to the employer. And obviously this is a subjective thing. This isn't, there's no science behind this, but there is, you will be able to get a sense of what exactly they're looking for, and then how you will go ahead and alter your resume to suit that. So, as it says here, look at your resume. How many of those things that you consider the top 10 most important qualifications are reflected on your resume? Now, it's important to remember that you could apply to two companies for the exact same type of job, but they describe them very differently. Each company sort of has their own phraseology, their own buzzwords to describe a certain job. And even though two jobs might be exactly the same, company A will describe the position differently than company B. And this is, again, why reading the job posting is so important. So you look at what you would consider to be the top 10 most important qualifications, and then determine how they phrase those things, and incorporate that into your resume. So I mentioned earlier the computer programs that scan your resume. These are called applicant tracking systems. Essentially, it's like I said, it's just a computer program that scans your resume and tries to parse the information that's on there based on certain keywords that the employer sets. So it is very important to at least tweak a resume for each different position you apply for, especially if it's a job you really want. This is the trick now. The days of walking into a business and handing them your resume are long gone. When a company posts a job on Indeed, they'll get hundreds and hundreds of applicants. And it's just not practicable for a single person or even a team of people to go through every single resume and try to find the best candidates, because of the sheer volume of applications they'll be getting. That's just the reality nowadays. So companies have implemented these ATS systems to sort of, I guess, expedite that process. So here are the main reasons why an ATS, an applicant tracking system, might boot your resume out. Biggest one is the keywords. Okay. Again, how do you get your keywords? You get it from the job descriptions. You get it from the job posting. Another thing that happens a lot is each company might have a different website, and you'll have to create a different login for example, Aldi. If you were applying for a job at Aldi versus a job at Walmart, They each have their own website where they want you to apply, which means you have to create 2 separate logins, and they'll have 2 separate instructions on how to put your application up. So let's say company A says, do not copy and paste information from your resume, type it all out. There's a practical reason for that. I don't quite understand the computer science behind it. But when they say stuff like that, they really mean it, and it's important because it will often lead to whatever document, whatever you submit, converting electronic documents from one file format to another often leads to the document just looking like pure gibberish. So if you don't want your resume to look like pure gibberish to the computer, it's important to just follow the instructions exactly. Keywords are the biggest thing, and then just following the directions. What I always encourage people to do is to have a online resume that you'll submit on websites, and then you'll have what I call a pretty resume. Your pretty one is the one you would email to the HR person if you know somebody that you want to get your resume in front of. The one you're going to email, the one you're going to take to the job fair, the one you're going to take to the job interview. That's one that looks nice, it's formatted nicely, it's clean, it's sharp. You'll also want your online one. You'll notice in this picture on the right of the slide here, this document here contains all the exact same information, but you'll notice it looks pretty plain. And the reason for that is because that kind of document is easier for the computer to parse. When you submit a PDF, for example, a PDF is essentially a picture of your document. The computer can't scan and interact with that picture the same way it could scan and interact with this document format that they use on the right. So something like this, it looks boring and it looks simple, but this will get you through the computer and in front of a real person. And again, you keep your pretty resume for when you want to show it to a person rather than just upload it online. Another reason you might not get through the ATS is because of a cover letter. I always hear that approximately 50% of employers don't look at the cover letter at all. They'll just toss it out. The thing is, you don't know when you apply for a job whether they're one of the 50% who throws it away or one of the 50% who actually reads it. So therefore, I would say just have one. And it's the same sort of thing like with your resume where you'll have a template, but you'll want to tweak it, alter some of the wording at least a little bit, depending on the job you're applying for. Another reason your job, you might not get a call back is because you're simply not qualified. That happens, it's okay. Not everybody's qualified for every job. I would encourage you to focus on the things you can control, which are the keywords and the formatting. There's a couple different types of resume you could make. There are what we call chronological resumes. That's your standard format. I worked here from 2004 to 2007. I worked here from 2008 to 2020, whatever it might be. You have a list of jobs that you've worked in chronological order, and then you have descriptions of what you did at those jobs. That is a standard, the most basic resume format that there is. Now, a lot of people might have big gaps in their resume. Again, it's normal and it happens all the time. Let's say somebody has a child and now you're out of the workforce because you're raising your child for at least until they're old enough to go to school. When you go to apply for a job, they say, what's with this big gap in your resume? Things like that, if you do have gaps in your resume, the functional resume is also, it's a perfectly reasonable and valid way to build your resume. And what I always tell people is that if you're going to be making a functional resume, it is reasonable and it is acceptable to have a separate section, one section where it just says relevant job experience. Let's say you're applying for a shift manager position at a restaurant. You have your relevant job experience, which will be I worked at Taco Bell for this many years, I worked wherever. That's your relevant job experience. And it is perfectly acceptable to just have a section that just says other job experience and just list out jobs that you don't feel are related to the job you're looking for. Another thing I always emphasize is that just because two jobs might be at different fields doesn't mean that you don't have skills that will transfer between them. There are skills that you use in every job that will transfer to every other job, whether it's soft skills, things like problem solving, de-escalation, how to handle conflict, things like that. That will apply to every job you'll ever have. So try to think outside the box when it comes to making your resume and describing the skills you use. Then there's the hybrid, which is essentially a mixture of the two. The functional resume is very good for not hiding, but sort of cleaning up gaps in your resume. The chronological one is just, I worked here, then I worked here, then I worked here. The advantage to the chronological is that it's just the most simple, basic sort of resume format. It's easy to read. It just makes sense. I worked here, then I worked there. Easy peasy. The disadvantage to that is, like I mentioned, if there are gaps, they become very apparent when looking at a chronological resume. The functional resume, again, it's good for, as it says here, de-emphasizing spotty work history. And for whatever reason, it happens all the time. It's perfectly reasonable and normal to make a resume like this to de-emphasize spotty work history. The disadvantage, of course, is that you're not giving a full in-depth explanation of each job you've had. But again, that's fine because not every job is going to relate to the one you're applying for. And then, as I mentioned, the hybrid would be sort of a mixture of the two. You'll notice here on the image here on the right, it has work history just essentially from the last 4 years. Now, like I mentioned, it's perfectly reasonable to, at the bottom of this page, for instance, say other work experience. Work experience that's not necessarily relevant to what you're going for. Perfectly valid and reasonable thing to do. So you've got, I always recommend that people don't put their full address. You see here that there's the ATS data set, which is to say it looks through and it looks for your skills and it looks for your contact info, it looks for education, it scans your resume and looks for that. Then there is also, the elements that a lot of people will put on their resume that they really ought not to, which is their address, their cell phone number, things like that. But again, it's important to, when it comes to giving your phone number out, what does your outgoing voicemail say? Hey, this is John Doe. Please leave a message and I'll call you back as soon as possible. That's good. If you were to say, a lot of people will do the joke where they'll say, hey, how's it going? And then you'll hear the beep and it's like, oh, they're messing with me. If you're applying for jobs and you're waiting on employers to call you back, do not have that as your outgoing voicemail. That will be annoying and they might not want to call you back afterwards. So keep in mind things like that. Another thing would be your email address. I've seen a lot of funny email addresses that I wouldn't necessarily want my employer to see. Even something, it doesn't even have to be inappropriate. Even something as simple as, Bears fan, Bears fan 24. Maybe the person reading the resume is a Packers fan and the Packers just lost to the Bears last night. That doesn't mean that they're, it's just one more thing that counts against you. It's not that big a deal to most reasonable humans, but it's something to keep in mind. Have an email address that's simple, first name dot last name, and then some numbers or whatever you need to make it unique. There are what we call summary and objective statements. I think it's perfectly valid to just sort of, you call it whichever one you want. Summary would essentially be, here's a list of, or here's a brief description of the skills I've learned and the experience I have attained over my career. And you just do, it's very simple, 3, 4 sentences tops. What I always say is, here's what I've done, here's what I'm good at, and here's why I'd be a good employee. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. The objective statement would be something more along the lines of, I hope to see myself in X position in however many years. I would like to see myself as a board member or administrator or, coach of the football team, whatever it might be. These two things can be combined. They're not necessarily separate things. You can combine this all into just one summary or one statement that shows up at the top of your resume. Here's what I've done, here's what I'm good at, here's where I'd like to be, and here's why I'm a good employee. There you go. Doesn't need to be complicated, doesn't need to be fancy. Plain language is fine. The reason you say this is, especially the why are you a good employee, as it says here, when you're developing this statement that you want to put there, what are your key selling points? What do you want to accomplish, and what's your goal? That would be more of an objective statement. Again, you can combine these two things. You'll always, always, on your resume, want to include a section that says skills. And those skills can be, we sort of distinguish between what we call hard skills and soft skills. Your hard skill would be certifications or credentials that you have within your industry. Tech certifications if you're trying to be an IT person or whatever it might be. CPR certification if you want to be a lifeguard, for instance. Those are hard skills. Soft skills are things more along the lines of, I'm personable, I am good at working with others, show up on time, I'm good teammate, things like that. Those would be soft skills. Those are just as important, and I promise you, the vast majority of employers, they really want those soft skills. It's important that they can rely on you to not show up late, or just not show up at all, or cause drama in the workplace. Things like this the soft skills are very important. Just because they're not industry specific doesn't mean that you want to ignore those. They are important. If you're going to apply for a position as a CNA, you don't necessarily need to list your different IT, your different tech certifications and credentials. Try to keep it focused on things that will be relevant to your position. And please keep it limited, no more than 20 bullet points or so. It does start to get too long and too much if you go much beyond that. Same thing with your job descriptions. I would say, 4 or 5 bullet points per job description is where you want to be. When it gets too long, it just becomes annoying at a certain point, and people don't want to look at it, and they'll just move on to the next one. So you've got your industry, your technical skills, and then you've also got your list of soft skills. It says here, and I agree, each skill you need to mention that skill at least 3 times throughout your resume. That doesn't mean you need to list the same skill, skilled with experience with Microsoft Office. That doesn't mean you just list it 3 times in a row in your skills section. It means that when you're writing your job descriptions, make sure to include it. If it's a skill that you have and it's a skill that's especially relevant to your position you're applying for, then always make sure that at least 3 times it comes up in your resume. Job descriptions, your list of skills, wherever it might be, your objective statement, your summary, wherever it might be. Another thing that makes for example, the functional resume, going back to that, if you are fresh out of school and you don't have job experience necessarily in the field you're looking for, then you need to emphasize your education. You need to emphasize internships, things like that. Lacking job experience will make it harder. And that's why you need to emphasize the skills that you do have and the experience you do have. So if you are lacking if your job history is spotty or you're lacking in work experience, then emphasize the skills that you do have. Emphasize education, things like that. What projects have you done? What conferences have you attended? What did you write your graduate thesis on? Things like this. It's important when you're doing your job descriptions, when you're going through your work experience, it's important to emphasize things that you've done well. Um, Again, you don't want these to be too long, but a list of things you did is fine. What you'll also want to emphasize is, let's say you implemented a new standard operating procedure that made things 3% more efficient or led to, an extra $1,000 per month of revenue, whatever it might be. Anytime you can put numbers like that into the resume, it looks very good. A lot of these things, you'll be writing this well after the fact, and it will be difficult to sort of remember exact numbers, but anytime you can say, I supervised 5 employees, I was a team lead over an assembly line of 12 employees, whatever it might be. If you can put numbers like that, anytime you're able to quantify the work that you did or the things you accomplished, that looks very good. A piece of advice I hear from employers and HR people a lot is you don't need anything older than 10 years on your resume. I say that, but let's say you're doing a career change. Maybe 15 years ago, you worked as a CNA, and now you went to school, you did other things, you left the medical field entirely, and now you want to get back into it. Let's say now you want to get your RN, and now you want to be an RN. Then absolutely put that CNA experience on there, even if it's more than 10 years old. Again, you want to tailor the resume to the job you're looking for. And that's where I say there is no science to any of this. A lot of this is just going with your gut. If you haven't been in school for a few years, don't put your GPA on your resume. To be blunt, they don't care. If you have like special credentials, if you have special qualifications, let's say you attended a conference for the top 5% students in the country or whatever, something like that. Put those things on there: awards, honors, certifications, credentials. Those look good, but you don't need to put that you got a 3.9. They don't really care, to be honest with you. If you have a PhD or a master's, put that on there. If you have several degrees, just list the ones that are relevant to the position you're applying for. If you are currently in school, then you'll put something along the lines of pursuing a degree or pursuing a certification in HVAC or in welding. My projected graduation date is May 2026, whatever it might be. If you are a veteran, always put that on your resume. It looks good. It's very nice. So make sure to put that on there. Put when you served, the years, the dates, the months, whatever it might be, and then what branch you were in. So the career portfolio is kind of an interesting idea. This would be something where you only really need it if you're going to somewhere where you're meeting people in person. If you're applying for a job on Indeed or online, you don't necessarily need to have this portfolio, but if you're going to a job fair, if you're going to open interviews, if you are going to a job interview with in person in a physical job interview, have something like this. It doesn't have to be, again, very fancy or anything like that. Just any certifications you have, put it in the portfolio. copy of your resume, put it in there. Copy of your cover letter, put it in there. I always recommend to, when you go to a job interview, take a copy of the job posting. Again, you don't need to memorize the job posting, but anytime you can make a connection between your resume and the job posting, it gives you points. So if they ask you a question, tell me about your work experience, you can say, oh, I see in your job posting you're looking for someone with 3 to 5 years experience in Microsoft Office. So anytime you're able to connect the job post, well, if you look at my resume, you'll see that I've been using Microsoft Office for 10 years. Anytime you are able to make a connection like that between the job posting and the resume, it's awesome. So just bring a copy of it with you. Skills, abilities, certifications, qualifications, anything that shows, that sort of proves that you are able to do the job, throw it in this portfolio. It could be just a folder, doesn't have to be fancy. If you're looking for a position in a creative field, graphic design, copywriting, or even you want to write for a newspaper or a blog, same thing, have copies of your work that you can show. List of accomplishments, any special conferences that you went to. If you have letters of recommendation or references and you want to include those, put them in the portfolio. You won't necessarily need to provide a copy of your transcript in person like that. A lot of places will want one, but again, it's the kind of thing where if you have a copy of it, just put it in the portfolio. Any professional developmental activities, so any continuing education you've done. A lot of certifications, you have to continue to take certain classes in order to maintain the certification. That's pretty normal. So any continuing education you've done, throw that in there. List of references, any volunteering or community service you've done. Cover letters, like it says here, half of them look at them, half of the employers don't. So it's a good way, you might as well write one. And it's a good way to put more keywords in. And it's another way that you can sort of emphasize yourself as an individual rather than just another person applying for the job. So you can make it a little more personable and you can make it more human sounding than if it were just a resume that ChatGPT created, for instance. So, good cover letter. You don't need to just list off everything that's on your resume. They have your resume for that. Number 5 here, and I say this to people all the time, do not apologize for the skills that you don't have. For example, let's go back to the job posting idea. Let's say the job posting says, we want someone with 3 to 5 years of experience with Microsoft Office. And you've done a job where you used Microsoft Office for 2 years. Don't apologize for that. Don't even bring it up. Just say, I have experience with Microsoft Office. You don't ever want to lead off with the things you don't have. And I always recommend that when it comes to a common job interview question that you'll get a lot is, tell me about one of your weaknesses. And I always encourage people to frame any skills you don't have or any lack of education or lack of experience, frame that as something you're working on. That implies progress. It implies I don't have, or you would say, well, I'm still working on gathering the job experience that I need for this position, or I'm moving forward, I'm working on it, I'm improving, whatever it might be. I would strongly encourage you not to say, even though I've only got 2 years of Microsoft Word experience, I am able to perform the job. Don't say that. Here's a good example of a cover letter. You'll see in this first paragraph, I'm applying for this position, and I recently completed this certificate. Next paragraph is about them. It's about the person writing it. Here is some job experience that I've had that applies to this position. Here is some real world experience that I have that applies to this position. You'll notice that this cover letter, it's not very long. We're talking maybe 10, 15 sentences tops. It does not have to be fancy. It does not have to be wordy or anything like that. Straightforward, plain language. I have this skill, it applies to the job this way. I have this experience, it applies to the job this way. Another question you'll get a lot when you're going through the interview process. So it says application process, right? Research the company and why do you want to work for them? Again, this is a common job interview question. There's a million jobs posted online, on Indeed, wherever. And you could have applied for any of them, but you picked this one. Why? It's important that you have an answer to that question when asked. A common, what I consider to be a very good answer would be, well, I noticed in your job posting that you want someone with 3 to 5, we'll go back to this, 3 to 5 years of Microsoft Office experience. And you'll see on my resume, again, making connections between the posting and the resume, you'll see that I have 10 years of experience using this, and I think my combination of skills and experience would make me a good fit for this position. There you go. That's what you're trying to get across. So when they say research the company, that doesn't mean that you need a list of every CEO they've had since 1914. It just means know something about what they make, know what they do. It's important, it really is, because they will ask, what do you know about this company? And it's important that you have something to say. Job fairs, I've mentioned them a couple times in here, but it can be sort of awkward if you've never been to one of these before. But it very much is a great opportunity. You take a copy of your resume, you go around every job fair I've ever seen and been a part of, each employer has a table, and they've got people from that company representing the company sitting at each table. And you can go around and you can talk, you can kind of speed date. You talk to all these different employers. What kind of positions do you have available? A lot of the time, you'll either be talking to someone who will supervise you in the position you have, or will be hiring you, interviewing you if you get asked to do a job interview. You'll be speaking directly to a person who knows the job, and or someone who will be the person who decides whether or not you get the job. Again, this is a great opportunity to get business cards. This is a great opportunity to show your face, so that when they do interview you, oh yeah, I recognize you. I saw you at the job fair. You're almost certainly not going to walk into a job fair and walk out with a job. Almost certainly not. The point of the job fair is that you make yourself look nice, you go and you are presentable, and you show your face to employers. You shake hands, you get business cards. That's what it's about. As with any professional type event that you want to put your best foot forward, make sure you smell nice, make sure your breath doesn't stink, things like that. Don't overdo the cologne, make sure your pants aren't ripped, you don't have stains all over your shirt, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be fancy. Some slacks or even just nice looking jeans and a button-up shirt or a blouse, something like that works great. Again, you don't need to dress in a tuxedo. You don't need to put a suit on for a job fair, anything like that. Just make sure that your clothes are clean and, orderly. And this is another opportunity. This is one of those instances where you'll want to bring your career portfolio. Another very good question to ask when you're speaking with someone at a job fair. They'll say, you'll be in a conversation, you can tell if you're getting along okay. You say, what's the next step? Usually they'll say, go on the website and apply for the position there. And then you'll ask, okay, is there any way I could contact you? Could I get your card? Things like that. They might say no, and that's fine. But at least you asked. Because the response most of the time is going to be, oh, well, you have to go apply on the job on our website. That's fine. Always follow up. What's the next step? What can I do then? You want to be moving forward. You want to be taking the next step. It's important that you present yourself as though you are making progress and that you're moving forward. And always make sure to say, thanks for your time, I appreciate it. I hope to hear from you. Something like that. Anytime you apply for a job, or anytime you job interview, I would say you don't have to send a card with flowers or anything like that. An email is fine. Hey, thanks for your time. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak with you. I hope to hear from you soon. Again, nothing fancy, nothing extraordinary, plain language, straightforward. Thanks for your time. So that wraps us up. Thank you very much for your time and for your patience. I appreciate you and good luck out there.